What's up, guys? Recording, pause recording. Oh, hope everybody had a good weekend. Looking forward to this week. If I'm being completely honest, I can't wait to potentially get into some higher time frame cells, provided we get some half decent criteria. So I'm going to jump into this in just a minute. Just need to fix a couple different things. Okay, I'm going to jump into this. Like most of you guys know, I'm hosting my parents. They're coming from 6 hours away, so I'm going to go spend some time with them outside. So I'm going to, like I said, just jump right into this right now. So first thing I want to look at is sort of the daily chart, give us a little bit of an idea of what it is that we should be looking for. And a couple things I just want to note are things up in this area. So you can kind of see very similar sort of price behavior here, 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 kind of having this small little piece of internal structure. Swing point would be more in this region right here. So just because we've broken above does not necessarily mean we're going to continue higher. It doesn't mean that we won't. It just means that we don't necessarily need to. This could just be a larger take on liquidity from the higher time frame, and then coming into more of this zone right here, right? So we are bearish until kind of proven otherwise. And the best way to sort of decipher whether or not we're going to continue in the bullish direction is we will assume that there's demand here and that we can take this into potentially a new high, if not at least a supply zone that's kind of presented here. So just little things to be mindful of as we're kind of moving into the week. So I'm going to keep this very short and sweet. The trades I'm looking to essentially capitalize on will be essentially from this supply area. If criteria is sort of met. We sort of spoke about this a little bit more in depth. When was that? I guess that would have been on Friday. So getting down onto like lower time frame stuff. Oops, let's go back just for a second and make this 240 supply, and let's go down to the 4 hour. So yeah, we're reacting to this sort of supply range. We've liquidated. You can see like sort of like the slowdown in price. And then furthermore, if I just jump out onto, again, we're just trying to keep to the higher time frame here. If you look at basically the next relevant demand zone for us, it's going to come from somewhere sort of in this region here. So that's going to be your 240 demand. I know this is all very basic stuff, but one of the things I really want to kind of stress, moving into any of these weeks really, and what you should kind of get out of these specific forecasting calls. Sorry, I'm choking on my words here. It is just understanding where the really high probability areas sort of come from. Yes, it usually starts at 2, Joe. I jumped on a few minutes early. Just a small recap. We're basically just looking at just higher time frame POIs. What to kind of expect for the week to come. So obviously it's a very apparent sort of downtrend that we're looking at. This is 4 hour swing structure. This is technically a swing point as well, but I see this more as a level of liquidity to sort of take into here to induce people into longs to then bring us to the downside. So like I said, the areas in which I'm looking to kind of capitalize on are going to be around these areas here and around these areas here. So if and when we sort of tap into these levels, we have a very specific set rules that we're sort of looking to kind of get ticked off here, right? So on the 4 hour, you can see that obviously like we're still maintaining this sort of bullish order flow. So ideally, like what you're going to want to see is seeing this low sort of give way. Now we can obviously get involved in sells, yeah, up in this region to be able to potentially look to take shorts. How about the equal highs to the left, just above the 4-hour supply? You know what? Equal highs don't mean really anything, right? Like equal highs are sitting here. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get ran, right? If we get criteria that develops in here, we're going to take shorts down into demand, right? So will these get touched at some point? Possibly, but worrying about liquidity before structure and before order flow is kind of yeah, it's just going to leave you off on the sidelines a lot more often than you sort of need to, because there's trades available provided criteria gets met in here. Are we going to come down and potentially come into this demand, sweep down, and then maybe take out all of these equal highs and come into here? Sure, but you'll have missed out on the shorts, you'll have missed out on the longs, you'll have missed out on, you know, continuation shorts on 15-minute order flow and structural levels. You know what I mean? So will this get hit? Possibly. But the bottom line is we have trades that meet criteria all the way through here. So it's good to be sort of aware of these areas, but the bottom line is like you don't need to worry about them until we have reason to have something to target up in these levels. And that could potentially be what we're sort of building on the higher time frame moving forward. But there's all kinds of trades that are available until those are going to get swept, in my opinion. So if we look at this from like a 4-hour order flow perspective, obviously we're mitigating the demand range. We've tapped back in. If this fails to make a new high, which basically means if we see an order flow realignment on a 15-minute chart, we can assume that this low could potentially be weak. And then we can possibly look into trading into this higher time frame flip zone to take some profits, and then expect to have one of two things happen, right? We can either essentially come down into this demand, right? Have our order flow realignment that sort of happens in here. And there's a couple of different ways you can play this. You can either play this into what could potentially be a weak high, or you could play it into a supply zone that ends up switching order flow for us, right? So, and then looking for the higher time frame shorts to then target the demand that gets created, or potentially a lot lower depending on how this ends up forming up for us. So you just need to understand that, like, we can't actually predict the market. We need to understand you know, where the high probability setups are coming from. And the best way to sort of decipher where your target should come from is target where you would take your next trade from. So if we were to take a short from right now, or short from here rather, where's the first place that you would want to take your profits? If this was like a 1-minute chart, well, you've got demand here, but like we've kind of already mitigated this demand, right? So the idea is that if we see order flow realign out of supply on a lower time, so let's go down to a lower time frame because this might make a little bit more sense. You're ideally going to want to say, okay, like ultimately, look at this, right? Like order flow has basically switched back over. We've punched in a high. And if we end up breaking down in this low right here, can we agree that more than likely we are going to now run this as liquidity and then be able to essentially target these weak lows into the next area of demand, which is the higher time frame longs? Take it to the first unmitigated zone is typically, you know, like just a kind of like a safe haven. So in something like this, like let's say everything aligned, you had taken shorts in here, you know, first reaction point is going to be down in here. This is more apparent on like a 15-minute. You can just see that order flow kind of realigns right on the change of character off of an unmitigated demand level. So first level that you would take your sells to would be here. And then furthermore, you would be taking this into the next demand level beyond this to be able to then look for the same exact thing, right? So yeah, keeping this more higher time frame perspective and you know, more focused on where the high probability pivot points are. Personally, the way that I'm viewing this is if we break this low, essentially what we could look for is a retracement back up into here potentially, and then taking this deeper into a demand zone. Once we hit the demand zone, if we get a realignment, something along the lines of this, we could then maybe target equal highs to sweep deeper into this POI, and then potentially look for shorts to come deeper into this. It's all going to depend on how delivery happens in these zones if and when we sort of tap into them. Right now, we technically on the 4-hour chart have to remain bullish with our sort of bias up until we see some form of an order flow shift on the 4 hour. However, because we utilize the 15-minute typically for our structure mapping, we can start to get into not premature shorts, but just kind of staying ahead of the game and seeing what's happening and understanding that, we basically just liquidated through these highs and then immediately crashed through our level of a flip at this demand zone right here. And now we've just come back into essentially mitigate it. We've tapped into the low, but we've had very poor delivery away from it. Chances are we will sweep down a little bit deeper, and then we can start to look at what's happening in this zone. I would not be necessarily looking for longs in here. Ideally, I would like to see this low get ran before we start looking for longs from a higher time frame. And like I said, this is all correlating, your POIs with your 4 hour narrative here. And if you look at this, like I said, if this is like a 1 minute chart right now, it would be a no-brainer. The first place you would be looking to potentially get involved would be this flip zone, right? So it's the same thing here. Now, could we drive one more time into the high? It's possible, absolutely. But we're going to play criteria, right? So as it stands right now, we are looking to essentially build a narrative to be able to get ourselves into a potential short that would run these weak lows. And then furthermore, if and when that happens, we can then start to look at high probability areas like the flip, a little bit deeper into the flip, and then looking for criteria to trade this against the 4 hour counter trend leg. Does that make sense for everybody? Drop a 1 in the comments if you're with me, and a 2 if you have any questions. What's up there, Lucas?
Yeah, listen, I don't want to say it's
I
too
cannot
ambitious.
hear you, so give me 2 seconds.
Can you hear me now?
Not sure what's going on with my speakers. Do you have your mic on, Lucas?
Yeah.
There we go.
Can you hear me now, Tyson?
Yep.
Yeah, so my question is basically like how I'm seeing it, like I spent a lot of time just going over the charts this weekend, and basically like what kind of puts me off that this level will not hold is that I get it, like we've broken structure, we're like quite overextended, we've tapped to a weekly supply, right?
Mhm.
But like we've liquidated this level and we immediately broken structure. So like this kind of like tells me that like supply is not in control, at least on the high time frame.
On the higher time frame, not yet. You're right. So that's what I'm saying is when we're in here on a lower time frame, we can start to see a lot more clues. And you have to understand that this is the first area in which order flow tried to shift, right?
Yeah.
So it's the first sign of weakness, correct?
Yeah.
So this is just used as inducement to potentially liquidate, is what we're suspecting, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying is basically that first chart is going to
Get ran.
as an inducement, and then we will still come to the downside, right?
And it does not mean that we are going to. It's just if you have a narrative for both sides of this, it becomes a lot easier to make decisions if and when these things sort of play out on that lower time frame and the more medium time frame, right? So when order flow realigns on our 15 after we've liquidated into a larger supply range, typically what's going to happen is we're going to see a reaccumulation phase sort of happen underneath that next liquid point.
So
Right.
could you go quickly to the 15 just to clarify that? So if we break these levels, right? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we break these levels
Mhm.
and we create new structure,
Mhm.
something like this,
Mhm.
it is 100% okay to take a short, at least to this level, right?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
Because we're following the 15-minute structure now, right? So 15-minute structure, like this is your swing, right? But your internal is going to be like this. And we're assuming, again, structure is just one piece of the pie. We have to kind of make these things work from a multi-time frame sort of analysis, and understanding that we have tapped into higher time frame supply, we've liquidated and immediately dropped back into the range. Chances are we're going to see a lot of people going long here, which is incentive for larger financial institutions to be able to essentially grab the liquidity underneath the lows, right?
Yeah. So if we want to take, let's say, if someone sees this as, let's say, this is his 15-minute swing structure.
Yeah.
And he wants to take a long from here,
Mhm.
it is much safer to see at least a 15-minute chart, right?
Well, 100%. And the reason you can say this is because we are leaving from a supply zone, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So any long that you take is technically going to be counter order flow until a internal swing point gives way, correct?
Mhm, mhm.
And then that would realign us.
Yeah.
Because right now, that's what it looks like is going to happen.
Mhm, mhm. And even one more question, because I don't want to waste your time, by the way.
No,
So
no, you're not wasting time, man.
even when price comes down and forms something like this, let's say of that,
Mhm.
this doesn't mean that this structure will be broken, right? You could still view potentially as this your structure. So if you get a realignment here, we should sell it into this level, right?
I would say yes. I am definitely favoring sells. Like I said, and the reason why, and the whole reason for this is because we are leaving from the supply, and higher time frame EOF is to punch in a new low, right?
Yeah. No, I
So,
agree. I'm with you. I'm with
so
you. I just want to clarify that. You know?
yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Good questions. But yeah, bottom line is like you can look for criteria for longs in these regions as well. But doesn't it make more sense, like because we are so extended? And again, this can still just keep climbing. There's no reason it can't. But we're suspecting that we're going to start pulling back, right? Because if we're having our initial change of character on the 4 hour down to the left hand side, what are we going to want to do? We're going to want to reaccumulate, right?
Yeah, I agree. They want to come down here, right? They
Well,
want,
that's, yeah, of course, but they need to develop the chart so that people are going to go long here and then go short when they should be going long, right? So we're going to take shorts up here. We're not going to be taking shorts once we break here, right? We're going to start looking for long criteria to be able to trade into new supply zones.
yeah, got it. Yeah, thank you.
You know what I'm
Makes
saying?
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Cool, man. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. There's kind of like there's a threshold between, you know, anticipating the market and trying to predict the market. We're not here to predict anything. We're here to weigh out the options, what seems sensible, what seems to make sense at the time. And right now, ultimately looking for longs is technically, from a higher time frame, it's the only thing that we can really look at right now. But are we going to look at them from here, or are we going to look at, like, and I always kind of think about it in terms of like entry criteria. So if this was a 1 minute chart right now, we're tapping into supply, we've chalked, right? We've now mitigated, right? Liquidation, mitigation, chalk, and flip. That's typically our criteria, right? So at this point right here, does it make sense to look for longs in this leg? For me, not necessarily. However, we have not seen a higher time frame order flow shift to come back down, but because we can use the 15-minute to kind of navigate the internal structure waters, we can start to understand what is more likely to happen. And what's likely to happen here is we are going to play this counter trend leg, 4 hour counter trend leg, which will technically be pro structure within the 15-minute, if that makes sense. I know that's kind of wordy, but we're going to have all kinds of cool calls this week because we're hitting a pivot point, a potential pivot point in the market. I don't necessarily think that we're going to see this run this low. It does not mean that it cannot happen, but we're just going to play this into the next area, provided criteria shows itself, into the next area in which we'll essentially provide some sort of a reaction, right? And likely the next reaction is going to come from this demand that creates the expansion. But this will likely fail to take out this high, sweep down one last time, getting a lot of people looking for supply trades, and this will end up running this high, right? Gobble liquidity, because now if they want to bring it to the downside and there's a shitload of liquidity resting above here, there's incentive to mitigate out of positions here and basically be able to liquidate the early sellers to be able to then crash this down to the downside, right? So understanding what these scenarios could potentially look like and how to capitalize on them. And this is all in more or less like entry criteria is easy. Getting into the trades is easy. It's managing expectation in terms of like where the next trade could potentially come from. And if you have any doubts about where these high probability areas are, I did a video on it late last week on 6 different positions in which I think we could potentially see price. And it goes something along the lines of, this was the first one. The second one was up here. The third one is here to potentially this area, and then the fourth one down to here, and then the higher time frame one up like this potentially, and then looking for the sell from here to here. So just remember that the pivot points are so easy to be able to interpret from that higher time frame. Do not get lost on a 15 or a 30 or a 1 hour or even a 4 hour. If you want to have a really good idea of what's happening, don't be scared to flick through the daily and just say, okay, well, where are we in price? Is it reasonable right now to be able to just push through here? Probably not, right? There's not a whole lot of incentive for them to want to just drive price through. The incentive comes from here to then come down here to get people trapped on the wrong side of the market to be able to run this high into maybe something a little bit higher like this, and then potentially coming down to liquidate these positions to then run this higher, right? So you just need to understand how liquidity sort of builds, not so much just on a 15 or a 1 minute time frame, but on a higher time frame as well, so that you can understand where orders are compounding or compiling rather, and be able to understand where the incentive is for larger players in the game to essentially capitalize on orders, right? So like I said, right now, as it stands, it seems very clear. It seems very clear that the next area for the market to sort of fulfill orders is likely going to be down in this region at some point. And then whether or not this reaction takes out this high is a whole other thing, but we're going to assume that if we tap into here and create supply, the next area in which we would target would be the supply level, and then we will take this into potentially this week low or the demand level that gets created on the lower time frame, and then be able to adjust our narrative based off of what's available and how order flow realigns in these areas, so that we can decide whether or not this is going to be weak or this is going to be weak. Higher time frame trend, very easy. You know what I mean? Like we're sitting in the premium. If we were to jump out to a daily, which I think we're on right now, let's just go like this, and let's look at that. You can see almost to a pinpoint, we've just to say tapped into the premium. So we have a lot of time frames that are correlating with potentially looking for higher time frame sells. We're not going to target the week low, right? We're going to target the next area in which we're going to have a reaction from, so that we can trade this way into the newfound supply and then be able to take this down further if and when criteria is met. So just to, keep this as simple as possible and kind of regroup this entire phone call. Bottom line is we've tapped into higher time frame supply. We've seen an order flow shift and realignment on the 15-minute. If and when we, let me just go like this and go down to a 15. Basically, the next trade would potentially come from exactly where we are right now. The idea is that this is failing to break the low. We've now liquidated the high, right? So we failed to take out the low. Technically, if depending on how you view things, but this is again, like this is where you piece together multi-time frame. Technically, this would be a weak high. However, we've basically induced the highs, come back down. You can see how aggressively we've come back down. We've had an order flow shift and realignment, but you can see the poor delivery that's coming into here. Chances are we're going to see something along the lines of this, liquidating into a lower price, and then failing to take highs. So we want to bank on the fact that we want to potentially capitalize on this from an early stage, so that we can run this into a potential higher time frame weak point. How's I know that's a lot of words and a lot of things going on, but the bottom line is I don't have a sell bias necessarily. However, sell criteria seems to be forming up a lot better than buy criteria at this point. I would not necessarily be looking to go long after a liquidation of a high and an immediate dive back in. It looks like we're producing liquidity for a later date to be able to compound orders here to potentially see a higher time frame sweep to then take out 4 hour and daily swing structure. How does everybody feel about what we just went over? I know that's fast talking. I know there's a lot going on, but the bottom line is we're getting extended in price, and we're basically starting to develop criteria to look at the opposing side of the market, which is going to be a lot easier for us to trade given the fact that we are trading alongside higher time frame narrative. Any questions? Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to leave this. we're gonna regroup tomorrow. You know what I mean? We got Asia tonight. No need to rush into shit. Just, you know, let the market kind of come to you. Let, like, ideally for me, my perfect setup right now is let this week low essentially give way. You know, see something along the lines of this, and then potentially look for something in here or up here, depending on how criteria ends up building. And just remember, we're in the most premium area of price right now. I mean, obviously, like, we have higher levels on the daily, but in terms of the 4-hour, we are premiumly priced. We are getting our criteria met. These are very, very high probability trades that align with higher time frame narrative to be able to get involved during your challenges. We do not need to pick bottoms. We just take these pivot points on the 15-minute at swing structure levels and just take these into the abyss until basically order flow realigns for a bullish intention move. That's it. That's all. Keep things simple, guys. If it does not make sense on the charts and you don't see anything that quite fits the way that you're viewing things, guess what? Sit on your fucking hands and wait for something clear to happen. Because I'll tell you right now, the more patient you are with the setups, the more high quality they are going to be. Do not force something that you are not comfortable trading. And if you need to see this low give way first, and then a retracement back up into maybe a higher time frame flip zone before we start crashing down, then so be it. Do not stress about it. You don't need to guess what the next move is. You need to react to what price is delivering right now. And quite frankly, right now, we are in limbo between demand zones and supply zones that just got punched in. So let order flow establish, punch in a new low. Let's make sure that this is what it wants to do, right? And when we start to see that order flow realignment and we can confirm these entries, these are very high probability areas to be taking these into higher time frame sells. Cool. Awesome. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I will see you guys tomorrow morning for the pre-New York narrative. We'll have a quick look at what's going on in the markets after Asia. Typically, Monday's like a little bit of a wonky day. It's usually like a day where price kind of gets tossed around and they're sort of starting to establish what direction they want to go for the week. So yeah, don't be too scared if nothing lines up for the first day or so. We can anticipate what's kind of going to happen from that higher time frame, but let it align. Let the stars align. Do not guess what's going to happen. React to what you know is going to happen. Okay. So have a good day, guys. I will catch you guys tomorrow morning. Have a good one.